We begin by looking at the national carrier issue. The federal government took a decision and made an announcement that the issue of a national carrier was a matter of priority. And to actualize that, steps were taken to set up and inaugurate a committee to look into the issue. According to the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Aviation, Mr. Binta Bello, the inauguration of the committee became imperative in view of the interest shown in the venture by the President and his recent marching order. Now, to look at this issue with us this morning, it's my pleasure to welcome in our studios in Lagos, Mr. Yemi Dada, who is Acting Executive Secretary, Airline Operators of Nigeria. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We also have an aviation practitioner, Mr. Olumide Onwayo.
Thank you. Good morning.
And joining us from our Abuja studios, I'd like to welcome the Vice President of ATSAN, which is the Air Transport Services Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, Mr. Amadu Ilitris. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, let me start with the Executive Secretary. Now, I'd like to know exactly what you felt when you heard the announcement, and not just the announcement, the inauguration of the committee, showing that this is an urgent matter for the President.
Well, when we heard that the ministry officials had briefed the President, and as an outcome of that briefing, the President was said to have directed that the national carrier project should be put on fast track. A number of things went through our minds, top of which is the national carrier supposed to be a priority over what we already have on ground that we are still struggling with?
Which is exactly what?
The challenges in the aviation sector, which will affect even the national carrier, if established, are things that we think should take priority. Infrastructure, the general strategy of aviation, how do we want to fit into the global play of aviation as Nigeria? All that requires some level of planning. We will need to sit down as Nigerians and decide on what direction we really want to go. Because if you look at our current composition, let me put it that way, we have about 18 functional airports, various degrees of challenges at each of those airports, from the terminal buildings to the runways, to the aprons, taxiways. Channels have reported several times you have ground collisions, you have closures of airports, closures of airspace, and all those ones are still just a secondary symptom of a primary problem. And unless and until the primary problem is addressed, we will continue to proffer solutions that do not address the real issue.
The questions.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what were your thoughts when you heard the announcement?
Well, my first reaction was that, well, you know, Mr. President mentioned it even during this campaign period, and I was wondering why, if that would be the first thing he was going to do when he comes in, and he has come out to say that's what he wants. I agree with Mr. Dada that the national carrier cannot be taken in isolation. There are some other policies in place that need to be corrected. We need some policies to correct the industry so that the new airline. I am not for a national carrier, but I would prefer a national airline, because what we have presently are airlines that have not been able
Mr. Onwayo,
to compete.
What's a national carrier? What's a national airline?
Well, let me put it this way. When you look at the national carrier, everybody knows that it's a government-run, managed airline.
Not necessarily.
Yes.
I mean, British Airways is the national carrier of
British Airways.
British
Airways is the national airline. It was once the national carrier, but not the national airline. It's owned by the British people. institutions, British companies and organizations. It's right now. So it's a national airline right now.
Okay.
Investors, British investors, organizations, institutions, and prestataires.
So the national carrier is owned by the government.
Yeah, but it started as a national carrier owned by the British government.
So they're like the carrier is owned by the government. Yes. The airline is publicly owned and is run as a business.
By the business.
Okay, now we understand the difference.
But with government backing and support, protection. Government backing, support, and protection. They see government in two of them, but in the second one, government does not manage, does not run, but provides protection, provides policies, and protects.
So you are for a national airline, yes, not a professional carrier, not a national carrier. Yeah, okay, let me swing to Abuja and ask Mr. Ilitrus what his thoughts are on this matter. National carrier, national airline?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I think the decision of government to set up the Committee on the National Carrier is a welcome development, considering that Nigerians have yearned for it for over a decade now. You would recall that since the demise of Nigeria Airways, we've not been able to actually participate actively in the aviation practices, particularly with regards to consummation of the bilateral air services routes that Nigeria has signed with other countries. As we speak today, over 70% of those routes are lying fallow. The reason being that Nigeria has not been able to put in place, get an airline that would carry out the reciprocal side of the frequencies, the designations that Nigeria is supposed to consummate under those agreements. You must note that Nigeria has a big market in terms of aviation. I think in Africa, Nigeria should have the second largest market. And Nigeria has a large traveling population. What Nigeria needs is a carrier that would complement what the international airlines are doing. What the situation we have today is that because of lack of our inability to provide air services based on the reciprocity under the bilateral air services agreements, there has been excess capacity, load factor, pressure on the international airlines. And what we've seen over the years is that when such things happen, they come forward asking for additional frequencies and maybe entry points into Nigeria outside the rights they have under the BASAs. And because we are a country and we have to create that seamless synergy in travel for our population, Nigeria has had to, give in by granting additional frequencies to those airlines based on commercial considerations. So what we've been doing over the years is do commercial agreements wherein they pay certain money on the operations to the Nigerian government. I think it is not good for us as a country. We need to step up. We need to be actively involved in our aviation. Aviation contributes a great deal to national economic development. If you look at areas of tourism, if you have a functional aviation industry, it has a way of boosting tourism in a state.
Mr. Ilitrus, if I may come in here, there are those who believe that the situation in the aviation industry is should not all be blamed on past administrations, but should be laid squarely at the feet of those who are in that industry, you and your colleagues.
Well, That might not be totally correct. You would recall that you cannot discuss the issue of a national carrier without looking backwards at what happened actually happened to the defunct Nigeria Airways. Technically, and you would say that it was unfortunate that Nigeria Airways had to go down. But if you would have a flashback, what happened to Nigeria Airways was not unique to Nigeria. Most of the airlines, national carriers of most countries of the world, went down because there was a global recession in the airline industry. Giant airlines all over the world went down. But then, at the point Nigeria Airways had its problems, you can name countries in Africa. Kenyan Airways had the same problem. South Africa Airways had the same problem. But I think the decision that came up at that time was whether to turn around the fortunes of the airline or to sell. And I think in some other jurisdictions, they opted because of the fact that there's a sense of patriotism that comes with it, having a national airline of your own. South Africa, for instance, declined the option of liquidation and sale of the airline. What they did was to invite some technical experts to partner with their airline, and they injected a lot of money from external funds, and they were able to turn around the fortunes of the airline. They signed long agreements for refleeting of aircraft, and as we speak today, some of the new fleets you see in South African Airways, airplanes you see in South African Airways fleet, were airplanes that were ordered for as far back as 2001, between 2001 and 2003. Kenya Airways did the same thing. I beg your pardon, Mr.
Elitros.
With KLM.